the basics are what gets stuff done, and all the rest of the stuff you can waste so much time and so much energy and have so many frustrations by focusing on the little things when it's the big things that obviously matter. And so that was definitely one of the big things for me. And I think humans have this really interesting ability to like overestimate their abilities in the short term and underestimate their abilities in the long term.
Mm.
And you see this constantly in people who are like, well, I don't think I could, I'm a 60-minute 10K runner. I've never I don't think I could ever run 39. I don't think I could ever run 40, but I think that with 6 weeks of training I could run 55. They're like, I'll run 100 miles a week for 3 weeks and then I will be 5 minutes faster.
Hello and welcome back to the Skimo Gold podcast. I'm your host, Travis Macy. You can find my stuff at travismacy.com. Books, speaking, podcasts, and more. You can find our co-host, Cam Smith, at Cam from CB on Instagram. Thanks to Camp USA for sponsoring us. They've been part of the Skimo movement here in the U.S. and really in Italy as well. Camp's a small Italian company. They've got a U.S. branch, and they've been part of this movement from the start. When you think Skimo culture, think of Camp up there in the high mountains of Italy. And the products are great. I want to give a shout out to the people of Camp, especially Jesse Mattner. He runs Camp here in the United States, based in Colorado. Jesse's been around the sport. He's often out there, especially setting the fixed ropes at Skimo races. That's kind of his wheelhouse. And he's been out at the Grand Traverse, at the Power Four, all of these things in the tents, helping people out, brand activation. He's been there from the start. So, Jesse, great job. We appreciate you. Also, newer to the Skimo scene, Redmond Relight. They were on the ground at the World Cup in Solitude Mountain Resort. Maybe you saw their tent there. Great product for all of your electrolytes out there in training. And they have many tabletop products as well for adding salt and other things to your meals that taste great and maybe get you a little topped up on that sodium before your big output. Hey, big welcome today, as always, to Cam Smith and also to our mutual friend, the one and only from Summit County, Colorado, Joe Howdyshell of the Summit Endurance Academy. If you've been around Skimo in the Rockies and in Colorado, you've definitely seen Joe out there. You've heard his enthusiasm. Maybe you've heard his podcast. He's just a great guy. He's also a great coach. And he's got, subject of our talk today, he's got a book out. It's called Badass Class, and it's great. I enjoyed it. Cam enjoyed it. Lots of great reminders for me as a coach and as an athlete. I think Cam had some takeaways as well. We talk about those, and it's a great piece of writing that is it's highly instructional, but it's also accessible and it's fun. There's humor. There's a classic Joe stuff in there. I really recommend the book. I also recommend, here we are, January 1st, lots of people starting to think about coaching and training for the new year. This is a request. Think about Joe as a possible coach or think about me as a possible coach. That's what we do in addition to podcasting. Joe is really into the Skimo stuff. He also coaches summer athletes in a variety of sports, and I do as well. Handful of Skimo athletes. I do a lot of multi-sport in terms of lead challenge, adventure racing, and off-road multi-sport. I also coach ultra runners and I coach endurance mountain bikers as well. So if you're thinking about a coach, listen to this conversation and look up Joe or I. We'd love to hear from you. All right, folks, it's time to roll on Skimo Gold. We got to hear from Camp, just back from World Champs mountain running, out of the comfort zone. Give us
Oh
a real
man.
quick rundown, Cam. You're on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just ready to hear Joe tell us about his book for an hour, so so I'll
Yeah.
keep it brief. But yeah, I mean it was great. Like the courses, it's racing against runners, right? Like it's the best runners in the world: North America, Europe, Africa, South America, Asia, Oceania. Like it's literally everybody, and these are pure runners with 27-minute 10K PRs that are adding the trail strength and going for it, and I'm racing them on flats and racing on them uphills and racing them on downhills. So the level's super high, and it's fun to be in that mix. And races are competitive and tight, and lots of people out cheering, especially for those shorter mountain events. And yeah, it's just a great experience to push at that level and intensity and have a good time.
Rad. Did you find that you
Yeah.
were able to hang pretty well with the best when it was steep?
When it was steep, exactly, yeah. So if you kind of break
Yep.
down
Yep.
the uphill course, for example, in Strava
Mhm.
segments of there's like a 30% 4-minute effort to finish. And I think I was
Mhm.
second, was just like a couple of
Yep.
seconds behind Remy, for example, and then ahead of the rest of the guys. But there was a lot of 5% running or even less to get out there, and a lot of
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And
super
that's
fast
oh,
paces.
yeah, that
Yeah.
like you said, that having that 27-minute 10K speed at that point, you're like, what the fuck am
Right.
I gonna do with this?
Yeah. Yeah, like, it's a lot of 5-minute mile paces on slight uphills, and, like, "Man, I can't do
Right,
this
right.
over,
Yeah.
like, a 40-minute effort,
Yeah.
like, this is nuts."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But, yeah, as soon as it gets steep, then things get equalized, which is
Yeah.
good.
Well, cool, man.
Well,
Congrats. That looked fun.
Thanks, yeah, it was a
yeah,
great
we were
experience
very
and
proud of
fun to do
you.
it as part of a team. It kinda yeah, is the only way or one of the only ways, Skimo being another to kinda feel like you're racing as a team and a part of that
Mhm.
bigger goal as an adult in endurance sports. So, it's fun to be there with everyone and
Yeah.
cheering on the other races. And it's a good way to get to know a lot of really fast people and, yeah,
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah.
put a,
Yeah.
a face to the name of all the big running personalities out there. And yeah,
Mhm.
it's just great to feel a part of a team with such talented and great people and athletes. So, yeah, it's a blast.
Cool. Super
Yeah.
cool.
You should be proud, Cam. It was fun to follow for sure. And uh on that topic, congrats to Joe. Here it is, folks. Badass Class, the real life guide to training for endurance sport. Joe, way to go, man. Getting a book out there. I know you've worked hard on it. I know from personal experience just how much of a journey and a mission it is to go from the idea to the creation to the publishing, the marketing, and here I am holding it in my hand. Congrats.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and I've heard this from multiple people afterwards, and I think you and I talked about this afterwards. There's like a million ways that a book doesn't happen, and a thousand different little decisions of like, yeah, it easily could have just not. And I think that's, in talking with a lot of people who also haven't published books, it's like, yeah, I started one, and then one of those points happened, and yeah, it's interesting because like none of the individual parts felt like super hard, but it's kind of like training. It is just a battle of consistency. It's a battle to like
Hmm.
pick it back up again after you haven't touched it for a while. And luckily, the book doesn't detrain like we do. You don't set it down and the words start like eroding off the page. But yeah, there were a lot of gaps in there where and like my best friend Maddie, who's another coach and who's on my podcast with me. Um, there were a lot of times when he's like, "Hey man, I haven't heard anything about the book in a while. Have you even looked at it?" And I'm like, "Shit, no, I haven't." All right, back at it. Takes a village.
Yeah, that's a good friend and teammate there, and we all need those people to buoy us and at times to maybe use the carrot, but maybe use the stick as well. Joe, I
Yeah.
thought it was a great book. I really enjoyed it. It's simple, it's relevant, it's accessible, it's fun, and I think it's actionable. You know, I read a lot of these endurance training books. Some are more textbook like, some are more philosophical. Some of them honestly are just overwhelming, and they go so far into the weeds, into this or that, or all these spreadsheets of running training plans, or calculations with your 9 bike power zones and zone
Right.
7 A B C, and like, I'm not saying that it's not correct, but as far as being actionable, it's not really there. And when I read this book, man, I was like, this is great. Anyone can read this, whether a beginner, an intermediate, or, a pro like Cam. There's stuff you can take away and apply immediately. And also for me as a coach, great things I can apply too. So, like, you nailed it.
Thanks. Yeah, and that absolutely was the goal. I think one of the things that I see most when working with athletes, and it absolutely could be pros, is just that some of the foundational knowledge is incorrect. There is a base assumption somewhere in a lot of people's internal framework of how training works. There's like a pillar of that foundation that's incorrect. And I think part of that, especially these days, is just all of the little like tidbits on social media, that are delivered out of context, possibly correct, possibly incorrect. But then also, uh, a lot of people, and like myself included, I learned on these books they're coaching by spreadsheet, something like Joe Friel's, training for, or the triathletes coaching Bible, which is a phenomenal book.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it is all correct.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it needed to happen. Like, that information needed to be out there. But like, and I forget who the quote is, but there's a quote from some, long dead famous general or emperor or something, that's the no battle plan ever survives first contact with the enemy. And that's a training plan. It is a very rare training plan that gets written and then gets executed correctly in its entirety. Like, it just doesn't happen. And one of the things that I always thought was so missing from some of those really good training books was one was an explanation of what to do when one of those days wasn't right, when it was like really clearly like either I missed the workout or I should have missed the workout. Like, what do I do there? And because there wasn't a discussion of that, there certainly wasn't a discussion of, and here's why, and here's the underlying principles of training in a simple way that allows you to make decisions because you know the underlying principles. When you read a spreadsheet and you're like, okay, here's how many hours I need to get in a week, you then think, well, I didn't sleep last night, so I still need to get these hours in this week. And I do, I cover that a little bit in my book. But there's just not a whole lot of like, okay, hey, let's bring this back to first principles, and let's bring this back to like, the way that like physics is always trying to bring it back to like the universal property of gravity or the universal law of this or that or something like that. And so I think like the fact that we don't have some of those, and a lot of like coaching and training science, we don't have some of those like step back to first principles moments that people can then say like, okay, this got really complicated. I had this workout planned and I could have done this workout, but I did this workout instead. And then I didn't sleep and I didn't eat. It's so complicated. What are my first principles? What do I need to go back to say like, I made a right decision or I didn't make a right decision? Because one of the challenges with training is we usually don't know if it was a good decision until days or even weeks later. And so without this without some of these really good principles, you just constantly see people make not the best decision because they're trying to
Mm-hmm.
chase the hours in the week, or they're trying to check boxes or whatever they're at. And so, yeah, I really wanted to, try to present some of these really simplified first principles so that athletes could go and like you said, have something that's actionable in the real world when life gets in the way.
Yeah, nice. Cam, what do you think? Badass class, maybe the pinkest book around. I know that you've taken a look at least some of it. And did you have any initial impressions or questions, things that stood out to you?
It's the pinkest book around, and one with probably the most swear words. So if either of those are going to get your attention, grab this book. And if either of those are going to turn you off to it, then maybe change your mind and open your mind and give it a shot anyway. But Joe, what you were just saying, and then a takeaway that I had was one example you talked about was the general training and the specific training. And the exact example you gave, let's talk about 10K times again, was general training and just like living a fit, active, healthy lifestyle takes you from a 60-minute 10K to a 40-minute 10K. And then getting these details right takes you from 40 minutes to 39 minutes. And that minute of improvement is really fun and exciting, and what we're all pushing for a lot of the times. And it's like, I feel like you making this all so accessible and also well-rounded, and having 4 training zones instead of 9 that each have 3 letters, and really it's 27 of them, is you trying to say, like, let's get the steak and potatoes right. Let's make this work 99% of the time. Let's make this work for people of all kinds of lifestyles, bodies, situations, goals, and make it really, really good. And aim for the 39-minute 10K instead of the 38-58, where there's a pretty decent chance you're going to get hurt, sick, and never want to run again afterwards. That's kind of like how I feel reading through that section. Can you kind of riff on that and respond however you want?
Yeah. And again, I think, some of this, I feel for people who are trying to self-educate about training. Like there are just, especially if you have ever opened social media, it is so hard to figure out what matters and what doesn't. There's 1,000 people trying to tell you that this diet or this philosophy or this piece of something is going to be the thing that matters for you. And so when you combine that, it's so hard to be able to focus on the basics, which, as we know, are everybody on this podcast, like, we all know the basics are what gets stuff done, and all the rest of the stuff you can waste so much time and so much energy and have so many frustrations by focusing on the little things when it's the big things that obviously matter. And so that was definitely one of the big things for me. And I think humans have this really interesting ability to, like, overestimate their abilities in the short term and underestimate their abilities in the long term. And you see this constantly in people who are like, well, I don't think I could, I'm a 60-minute 10K runner. I don't think I could ever run 39. I don't think I could ever run 40, but I think that with 6 weeks of training, I could run 55. They're like, I'll run 100 miles a week for 3 weeks, and then I will be 5 minutes faster. It's like, no, you won't. You'll
add a few supplements
likely,
and buy some $300 shoes, and then I'm right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, you will be broken and broke and frustrated. But at the same, but those people don't sit back and think, like, oh, well, if I took a year to do this, and I train properly and I just do the basics and I keep it pretty simple, yeah, I could probably run 50. And then another year after that and I'm 40, and another year after that and I'm 37. Like we just don't think that's possible, but then at the same time we think, yeah, I can absolutely take 5 minutes off in the next 6 weeks for sure. Like no problem. And for me, that difference really is the difference between the unsexy general training and the sexy specific training. You know, everybody wants to go out and do these workouts that they read about in Runner's World, or that they saw this social media influencer do. And really what they're doing, you know, to borrow an age old analogy, they're just taking money out of the bank the whole time, instead of taking a lot of time, taking months or years to put money in the bank, and then so they can draw it out for that last little bit. So yeah, uh I am a big believer in, like, hey, let's take, when an athlete comes to me and they're like, hey, I have this thing to do in 3 months. And I'm like, my first instinct and my first conversation is almost always, hey, let's do this in 15 months. Like, let's do this race, not in, it's July. Let's not do this race in September. Let's do this race in September of next year. And let's still do that, like 3 months of specific training that you really want to do, but let's put a year of general training under the base, and you're going to blow your mind at your abilities. And luckily, over time, I've gotten better at that conversation, and I think more and more athletes are more willing to do that. And they've heard me talk, or they've read my Substack or something like that, and they're kind of expecting that anyhow. And it's wild. Like, I find that most people, after 3 months of really hard training, they are disappointed with their results. After a year of really basic training, they're blown away. Like, I had no idea I could do this. I'm like, yeah.
I think this conversation about general and specific training is perfect. This time of year, we're recording this early October. An athlete like Cam has kind of wrapped up the summer sport, and this is true probably of many Skimo athletes, and then starting to look to a winter Skimo season, whether that begins in November or December, or maybe it's in January or February. But it really shines a light on, like, okay, hopefully you've been doing something general, maybe something that was specific to trail running or mountain biking or multi-sport, and now you're going to shift to a different specificity. Highly relevant. And I love, Joe, the book is, as you said, it's not dogmatic. It doesn't say here's anything that's a key. It does say one thing very simply, that both volume and intensity are the most important type of workout. And I love that, because it's nice and simple. Like, we need volume, we need intensity. We also don't need too much of either one, and we need enough rest, and we got to drink, enough water and get enough sleep and eat good food. And that's kind of, those are the basics. And let's start with those before we get into, anything incredible about, what's the difference between a heart rate of 147 and 146, or, like whatever these other rabbit holes are, or the right supplement, or, start with the basics. And that's what you do here.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. You've just seen, just like you said, like, so many dogmatic arguments of this exact intensity is the most important thing. It's like, well, no, like, it's all within context. Like, you can't talk about intensity without the context of volume, and you can't talk about volume without the context of intensity. And it's very, very rare that somebody, there's always an exception to this rule. It's very rare that somebody can get away with only training really easy or only training really hard. Like, the halls of history are littered with the bodies of athletes who have tried either of those extreme approaches, and one in a million it ends up working for, and everybody and then they crow about it on social media, and a lot of people try to follow them. But yeah, I mean, it's just it's like, it's all at once so much simpler and so much more complicated than people try to make it out to be.
Yeah, yeah. What on that note, again, some of these books, or you listen to the cycling podcast, will get into debates about like training load distribution with zones. Should it be pyramidal? Should it be a block system? Should it be, something that the coach has made up on his own or her own? You make the case that workload is more important than a specific system of distribution. Say more about that, and just what does that mean in general for someone who hasn't heard these terms?
Yeah, I mean, and it's, like it's it is definitely an oversimplification, I think, that I made in the book a little bit, because I would say stress is more important. So stress being the result of the workload. But so, I've seen, and I think, like, and we know this in the beginning, and for most athletes for a really long time, all you have to do is something, and you get faster and faster and faster. And so I think we can all agree, like, in the beginning, intensity distribution doesn't matter at all. You could just say, like, go out and run, you could sprint down the block until you fall down every day for months. And then at some point when you're a professional, like, oh my God, does it matter? You really have to start playing, like, you have to, tiny little tweaks on the intensity and workload dial to make sure that it's just right, so that it doesn't push you under, but it's also stressing the parts that it needs to. And so it's kind of this spectrum of, like, the earlier you are in your journey to fitness, the more workload matters, and the later, the more the distribution matters, I think. But I would
Mhm.
argue that, and I think most people would agree with that, but I think most people would say, like, really early in the process, they would say, like, earlier than me in the process, they think that's when the distribution starts to matter more. And I think that, um, I, yeah, I'm not sure that I buy that. I think that for a long time, in particular, the and I think most coaches would agree with this. The pyramidal versus polarized really doesn't start to matter for quite some time. You can do, especially if your easy work is pretty easy, you can go a really long way just by having, like, most of your time be easy. And then some of it
Mhm.
doesn't really matter whether it's, a 30-minute, tempo or threshold effort, or a VO2 max workout. Like, they're both going to do super, you're going to see gains from those for a long time. Um, but really, I think, like, and it's interesting looking at the, oh God, what's it in? It's probably in, like, the training and racing with a power meter book. And they have this whole chart of what does zone 1, what structures and functions does zone 1 stress, and zone 2 stress, and zone 3 stress, and zone 4 stress. And, like, wonder of all wonders, they all stress the same thing. And so, really, whether we're out running at 110 beats a minute or 190 beats a minute, it's kind of stressing the same thing. And, like, when we've seen so many cases of athletes who've really gotten better by not, their easy work isn't really easy enough. I mean, and I would argue that that's, like, there are a lot of elites who don't learn that lesson until later in their career, that, like, oh man, if I make some of this stuff a little easier, holy crap, all of my workouts get harder. And so, up until that point, clearly, the perfect training intensity distribution was not a limiting factor. They did too much of their work in a harder zone. Um, and I would argue that probably what they did really well was they rested when they were tired.
Mm.
And you stress those things out enough, and then you recover them correctly. Even if the training intensity distribution isn't what we would call optimal, you're still going to see really good results. And I also think it's interesting, like, when you start talking about training intensity distribution, what is it, the thing that allows us to do? It allows us, like, a proper training intensity distribution of a lot of easy work is really just letting us add more stress with less recovery. or more workload with less recovery. And so even that would be an argument for, like, the training intensity distribution is still just a substitute for workload. It's still just allowing us to get the workload correct more often. And so that's, it's kind of that like circular argument that just goes back to workload's really important.
Here's the section I really like for the video viewers. This is called the skills, and we got this great pyramid at the bottom are life skills as a base, a foundation, then athlete skills, then performance skills. And audio listeners, you can find this on page 73 of Joe's book. I thought it was great because, again, often this is overlooked in like these training manuals. They just assume that like everyone has this dialed, and man, this shit is hard. Maybe you're like 23 and you just got out of college and you're like, one of these life skills is like knowing how to cook. I mean, that's really hard. Or maybe you're 30 or 35 or whatever, and you got like 2 little kids, and it's like, oh my God, how do I time management? Like, I'm still figuring out time management with my kids across the phases of life. Like these things are hard, and they're really, really important to the training. The other time, you said setting priorities, managing stress, sleep hygiene, and many more. Again, this is the foundational life skills. I'm curious, Cam, for you, like, do you feel like you have these dialed, or looking back, I think you've just hit 30, Cam. Like, do you wish you might have hit any of these skills sooner?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think back in retrospect of, like, I certainly took too much time to slow down on my easy days, and took too many years to, well, I mean, none of us were really fueling that hard until recently. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like tough and honorable to get out for a few hours without too much fuel. And Teague Holmes told us all that it was making us stronger. A mutual friend of all of ours. And yeah, I mean, like, there's certainly things that took me some time, but also um I think I did everything in such a way that I stayed healthy apart from catastrophic injuries and trauma injuries, and I avoided any big overtraining issues, and my stoke stayed high all along. So there's not a lot that I wish I had done differently from those skills perspectives. Um, but it's definitely important to reread those and think like, oh yeah, that's something that I have in my brain or that I know well, and think really critically about that. Because I think one example of something I wish I had done differently, and I think that this will connect back to exactly what you're saying in a second, was I studied sports psychology in college and got a minor in it, which is a tiny, tiny tip of the iceberg to what professionals are actually studying, and the amount of experience that they have working with clients. And every time I would hear about like sports psychology topics and buzzwords and think about it, it's like, oh, I've got all that. It's all in my brain. Like, I've been through this academically. I've been through this experientially. Like, yeah, no problem. And there's a reason that therapists have therapists and coaches have coaches, and nutritionists have nutritionists. Like, it's because it's hard to work on yourself, right? And so connecting
Mm.
that back to those topics, I think it's really important to read things like that from someone that has a tremendous amount of experience like Joe, and empty your brain and really think about it critically. Like, do I have good sleep hygiene? Like, do I have whatever you said, Joe, the Kindle Fire instead of the Kindle something else, like the light's different. Like really think
Yep.
critically and go in with an open mind when you have an expert in the room or an expert on the other side of the pages, and think hard about it, because that's yeah, I think that's the advice I would give, because in a book like this you might have less experience and read those athletic skills and be like, oh, it's important to account for those hard days of work with my training. Like, oh, I haven't thought about it that way. Like, maybe that's eye-opening to you. And then I'm also like flying back from the world championships of a high level sport and reading Joe's book and highlighting things and circling things and finding a lot out of it as well. So I think that that's something I definitely compliment in the book. And sorry, that's a bit of a tangent, Travis, but to send it back to you, Joe, like, can you kind of talk about how you wrote this book for such a wide audience, right? Because I really do admire and appreciate how, like I just mentioned, like, I think everyone can find so much out of it. So how did you capture such a large audience where there's giant discrepancies of your readers?
Yeah, well, thanks. I really appreciate that. I respect your experience and knowledge hugely. And so the fact that you found something out of this is like, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted, like, because as I said, I think there's always, and, and like to step back even a little bit further, like I had some big cycling goals a couple years ago and I hired a coach. I had a coach for 2.5 years. And it's because there's always little gaps in our knowledge. And I've been coaching for 15 years. I have a master's degree in exercise physiology, and I felt like I learned a ton from this coach. And I'm, kind of futzing with an injury right now, but when I'm back to it, I will probably hire a different coach, just because as a coach, I want like to get all these um, different perspectives. And so I think that one of the things that I really wanted to do with this was really get to the basics and really go over what all the basics are. And I think it's pretty rare to find somebody who just nails all the basics. Because again, like there's so many different places that we have learned little things. Like Teague at one point saying like, oh yeah, you can get by with just a gnarly granola bar for 6 hours. And then you're like, okay, great. I know that now. That is part of my internal framework. And sometimes we can carry this little piece of framework unexamined with us for a long time. Like I am certain that both Travis and I, who have been at this for so long and have been coaching for so long, do something that we would both look at each other and be like, really? You do that? Didn't you know all of this other stuff? And I'd be like, shit, I hadn't even thought of that. And so really like going just I felt like going back to the basics and going into the and not just like, here are the tips and tricks, but here are the underlying first principles behind why we do these things. Like there's so many little things that athletes are told to do, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. Well, it's like, well, but why? And like, oh, it turns out that a lot of that is for key workout performance. We want to make sure that we're fueled and we're not stressed and we're fresh enough to go hit the really high key performance workouts. And then some of these things that we're told, we're like, well, why do we do that? Well, it's like, well, that's so that we can handle a little more volume. Yeah. I mean, I guess it just comes back to wanting to make sure that the basics were really clear. And actually, like, to go back to your last point, Travis, one of the reasons why I wrote this is that it's so clear when you're looking at an elite athlete, is that they just do so many of those things. And when you look at the non-elite athlete, they don't do so many of those things. The elite athlete is like, I know that I need to rest and hydrate in order for me to have a good workout. And the busy father of 5 who has never been an athlete thinks that none of that shit matters. And they just go try to do the workout, and they're like, why am I failing again? And they don't even stop to think about, like, oh, I'm not rested and I'm stressed out and I didn't eat lunch. And so some of it was like, with that hierarchy of needs, was looking at like, wait, what do the best people do? Well, they just kind of take care of this shit without even thinking about it. And I would argue you cannot be there. There are some people who are some elite athletes who I've seen definitely who are not great at some of those life skills. But I would argue that basically every elite athlete has either figured out a way around them because they have a partner who cooks really well, or
Mhm.
they're good at them. Because you just can't. Like, you can't unless you have really good food, and you're good at making time. Because like so many of them they are about making time for and having enough space for high quality workouts.
Yeah, I liked in the athlete skills you include paying attention to your intensity and reflecting on your training. And those are two that I see. Joe, you and I both coach a lot of mature athletes, men and women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, smart people who've had and have successful careers, and they're killing it in many ways. And I've seen many of those such people, especially if they didn't grow up as an endurance athlete, that idea of paying attention to your intensity, it's actually a skill that must be learned, and they just they want to look at the watch, and my heart rate is this, or my power is that, or my fam is this, and okay, that's helpful, but like you gotta feel it too, and I think you say that in the book, and that's a skill to learn and then to reflect on it, and to also this is in the skills section, but you make a great point towards the end of the book. It's better to be cautious than to be on the sidelines, and you say very often the mistakes are less in undertraining and more in overtraining. Too much too soon. That whole 3-month mindset, the whole more is better, and in that it's leading to injury, to burnout, to other things, and then we've lost the consistency. And I feel like that's a thread throughout the book, is like, let's be consistent, let's have gradual progress, and let's also, I saw this word many times, and it comes across at times in the colorful language, let's have fun. And that's huge. Tell us about the fun. Like, why did you, it seems obvious to me why you included it, but again, many of these such books, they don't talk about fun and novelty and community and connection. You talk about all those things. I think they're essential.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, because like we've said, consistency is the key, and it takes a special kind of person to just go out there every day if they're not having fun, and I do not think that is a strategy that I would recommend to anyone, to just go out there and just do it even though it sucks. And and there's always going to be an element of not fun, because just to get a little philosophical here, a little meta, especially if you have not had a coach, or if you have not had a training plan, your and I mean, and even if you have, like, your strengths and weaknesses tend to be a reflection of what you like and don't like, because you go out and you do more of the things that you like and you do less of the things that you don't like. And so because of that, you end up with a certain set of strengths and weaknesses. And if you want to get to the next level in your performance, almost certainly you have to go out and do things you don't like to do, because, like, kind of by definition, you have to change what you've been doing. And if you've been doing what you like, guess what? You're not gonna necessarily love this new change. But there has to be some element of enjoyment in it. And I definitely do think there's a spectrum with everything. Like, elite athletes tend to need a little less fun, or define fun a little differently. And a lot of recreational athletes need a little more like type 1 fun. Um, but when it comes down to it, like, it has to be enjoyable.
Yeah, and that's once I passed it off to you, Joe, like earlier in the conversation, I realized I didn't close my thought of, I don't regret dialing in my details sooner, because that means I'm still here and I had a lot of time to keep building and get the bottom of that pyramid really wide, and then however many years later, like, I'm still here and doing it. And I think that that's something for younger listeners might not realize. Like, they're sort of in a small bubble right now. Like, here's your high school team, your college peers, whatever, and here's what we're all doing, and you all have goals and you're talking about the future. Like, a lot of people fade out from this sport. And there's a lot of people I raced with when I was younger that just aren't competing anymore. And they have great reasons for doing so, or are focusing on different things. But I think to stay in it the only way to reach your potential is to stay in these sports for a long time. And it's hard to stay in these sports for a long time if you don't have fun. But there's also, Travis, you sort of alluded to this, like, or both of you have alluded to this, like, some people have a lot of fun hitting that exact wattage on their Zwift race on Tuesday night with their virtual friends from all over the country. And that's great. And just because it's
Mhm.
not climbing up a ridge to a summit at sunset doesn't mean that they're not having a great time and doing something that's sustainable and exciting for them. And it can look totally different for someone else. And there are people out there that I'm really surprised are still training the way they're training. And some people I can think of, they're like, man, I can't think of the last time I heard them say, oh yeah, and then I went and did this trail because it's one that I love, or I climbed up to this peak or whatever. And it's and people have long careers
John
doing
Brown.
that too. Like, it can look totally different. So I kind of want to hear from Joe and Travis. Jump in if you want to, like, because you guys coach so many athletes. How have you seen that be different? Of people need different things for it to be fun. Like, I just want to hear you guys dive deeper into that.
Mhm.
Yeah, you wanna tackle that one, Travis?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say overall, this another thing that from this book that aligned with my coaching philosophy is it comes across as person centered in terms of let's start with a person, the whole person, and then move, from that to the athlete. But in order to move the athlete forward, the whole person has to be moving forward. And I think you're exactly right, Cam. That means different things to different people. And some athletes I coach, and I think a good coach will tap into this as much as possible up front, but then also over time through constant communication, we learn who is the athlete who just loves to have the same routine. Every Monday I do this, and every Tuesday I do this, or a small variation of this, and so forth. Some athletes love that, and if that makes someone tick, let's do that, and also add the correct variations in workload and volume to move them forward. There's other athletes who maybe it's a bit more the artistic side and a bit more of the flexibility or the seat of the pants, or like, oh man, the weather was great on Saturday and I wanted to go do this thing. And usually for me, if that inspires someone and you want to do it, let's go do it. And then let's adjust thereafter. Or if it's something that I think is too much, I'll tell them, hey, okay, you want to go do that awesome 40-mile ridge run? Like you can, and here's some of the possible costs. But it's up to you. So yeah, I think it's just helping people learn what makes them tick, and that could be athletically, but it's also very much on the personal level in terms of routines. Who do you train with? How do you train? How do you run your life? Like, we all have a different style, and as much as we can align the athletics with that style, probably things are going to go better. Great question, Cam. Do you have you want any thoughts to that, Joe?
No, yeah, I like what you said there. I think that just trying to tweak some of those dials, whether it's, I think some athletes really get a lot of joy out of just hitting the workout and feeling strong. I think some athletes get a lot of joy out of training with other people. Some athletes get a joy out of variety. They're like, oh, the
Hmm.
same workout again, Blah, boring. And so tweaking any of those little variables in order to make sure that they are yeah, just continuing to be emotionally bought in. I like one of my, I would say, weaknesses is I get frustrated with athletes who don't really care about the downsides, because I really try to be like, okay, here's you want to do this 42-mile ridge run. The longest run that you've done in the last 6 months is 10 miles. This is going to take you a week to
Exactly. Yeah.
recover from before you can do
Yeah.
another good workout
Yeah.
again. And they're like, okay. And they just go do it. And I'm like, okay, great, awesome. I'm not emotionally invested in your results at all. You can go do it. Shit.
I'm laughing because I know
It's
the
always,
feeling, Joe.
yeah, it's always hard to watch someone be uh um to be a little self-destructive in that realm for sure. But yeah, but and certainly as I have gotten older, I've gotten better and better and better at being like, hey, like here is I think the possible ramifications of that. And also, like, I know you love this shit. Like, that's why we do this, is to be good at this, like, 40. That's what, that's why you are trained, is to be good at this 42-mile ridge run thing. So, yeah, absolutely, like, worth the cost. Go nail it. If you ask me to do it again the next weekend, we might have a conversation. but yeah, I think trying to balance between what is optimal physically versus what is optimal psychologically is always part of the art, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, regarding that combination of the physical and psychological, and here's a question for both of you. It's regarding coping strategies. We all have stress. We all have better days and worse days. We have acute stressors. Many of us have ongoing stressors that are at times just really hard to deal with. And you write in the book, Joe, exercise can't be your only coping strategy. And when I read that, I almost felt like, holding up a mirror and really looking in that truly, because this is an area in my own life I've made tons of progress in creating these other coping strategies, ways to regulate my nervous system, to complete the cycle, so on and so forth. I've worked really hard at it. And like what is still my best and favorite and, knee jerk reaction coping strategy, it's exercise. And you make a great point that many an athlete has messed up the training progress. Probably, I know in my case, what happens is like going hard and doing too much on an easy day when I'm probably tired, I've got fatigue, I've got extra stress. And it's like, let's just go out there and burn this off because I love being on a bike. I love climbing the hill. I love pushing hard. And even if I know that in some ways I'm making things worse or messing up the training, it still happened. I think it happens less, but I will admit to it. So my question to you, maybe Cam first and then Joe, like, what are your other coping strategies if okay, today is an easy day or I need a rest day or a big race just happened and I'm all antsy and I want to go do a bunch, but I know I shouldn't. Like, what do you do or not do? Because that's hard.
Yeah, something that's on my mind as you guys have gone back and forth is that Joe wrote in the book I think you said very, very few, I don't think you said none, workouts that you would never give someone. That
Mm.
like there's a lot of crazy things out there, but there's almost always a case for each thing. And then Travis, a quote that I attribute to you and always think about you when I say you're here is, it's all good training. Right. And so the reason I bring both of those up are there's a time and place for the 5-minute walk around the block. And there's a time and the place for the 2-minute walk around the block because you have to be back for something else. And there's very few, but there is a time and a place for the 4 hours as hard as you can go because they just lost their job and their girlfriend on the same day. And then they're going to take a week off after that. And then you get back to training. But then this way you're not going to lose them completely. And so like there's a time and a place for almost everything. And that's something that I think you both have talked about before. And to answer your question, Travis, and why I bring that up is like having the ACL injury, for example, that I've talked to both of you a lot and talked to Joe on his podcast about a couple years ago, is I had this idea of what training needed to look like. I needed to, like, an endurance session is 20 minutes at minimum. And other than that, it's not really a workout. And Travis, you've said this exact thing too, that's not true. Or you need to get this much volume in and it has to be via a run, bike, this or that. And I spent almost a year with everything totally up in shambles. The whole plan, the book, the textbook was on fire. Nothing made sense because all I was doing was trying to lift my leg off the ground and crutch around the block, and that was my training. And I went through this whole process and just did what I could every day. And some days that was more, some days it was less, and it never looked like regular training. And then I got to the winter and everything was fine. And my fitness was fine. And I had gotten through this process. And And I was in a much better healthy mental health space than I was when I began, because I just did what I could on the day and then tried to make it
Mm,
fit in the best I could. But it really opened my mind um, to training can look different if you keep these principles right and think about it like that training is a compass, not a map, or it's like
mm.
a oh, what's another way to say it? Zach Miller said this once. They're like guidelines, not principles, maybe, of like you just need to be moving in this direction and try not to fall off too far that way and try not to fall off too far that way, but there's a lot of different ways this can go. And so I think, Travis, that coping strategy for me has gotten much wider, and I see now that it's all good training, and I see that there's just about a time and a place for every single workout, like you said, Joe. So I think that's kind of how I answer, is like, yeah, I need to get out, but it can be a 5 minute walk as my training thing, or it can be a totally different sport or something like that.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I'm working on a Substack post right now that's some element of that, because I had an athlete uh who I had this conversation with a week or two ago, and then there's like a there's a term in psychology called a reframe, right? And it's when you kind of look at the same situation but from a slightly different angle. And I think that the really important reframe in an injury is training is just doing the next best thing, and it doesn't look like anything. And so if you can say like, well, I am training, I'm doing physical therapy, I'm icing, I'm whatever that stuff is, if you can make that psychological shift into that, then you're good. Then you're training, and you can be, and you should be proud of that training. And this is what athletes do. Athletes get injured, athletes go to PT, and that is training, and that is all good. And it is that idea of training is doing what needs to be done that is the reason that exercise can't be your only coping strategy. Because if we start making decisions based on our psychological health, if we start making physical decisions based on our psychological health, then we are more often to make the wrong decision. We're going to, and like I said, like with the fun thing, you got to kind of do that sometimes. And like you said, Cam, you have to do these things sometimes. But like if you were like, well, the only way that I can feel good about myself right now is to, and let's say it was an injury that you could have run on, but like say you had like really bad patellar tendonitis instead of a completely blown to pieces ACL. And you had said like, well, the only way that I can be good right now is I need to go out and run on this. It's like, well, okay, then you're never going to get healthy again. And so, and I've just seen this so many times where athletes can really like sabotage their just from a practical sense. It's really hard to train and make progress if you can't take a day off or you can't go easy, because you have to run your demons to exhaustion every day. And so I think I learned this fairly often as an athlete, and definitely um, have spent a lot of time trying to figure out, like whether it's, I think my current favorite now is one of my least favorite words, which is breath work. Um, but that is probably what I do now the most, which is, I don't think there's any magical, you know, ratio or counting style, or don't give a shit if you do it through your mouth or your nose or whatever, but like I purposely try to slow down my breathing a couple times a day for a couple minutes, because it just calms my nervous system down a little bit. I am a journaler for sure. I have become later in life a walker also. Like I think that's I for so long was the guy who would like, if I was training, I would run up the hill. It didn't matter how steep it was. I was like, oh, 25%. Yeah, I'm just gonna pitter patter my way up this. And it took a long time for me to get to the point where I'm like, man, walking really is the shit. It just feels so fucking good. If you can just like get past the first 2 or 3 minutes where you're bored, and then you get to like 20 minutes in and you're like in the woods and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it's, it doesn't take the place of my of any of my workouts or anything, but man, when like if you walk a fair bit and then you're in a tough place and you're like, okay, great, I'm gonna go walk in the woods for a little bit. And it's not physically stressful. It's not gonna, make any of my injuries worse or anything. And so it's just, yet another coping strategy, yet another lever to pull to make sure that my head's good.
So much good stuff. This is, folks, again, listeners, check it out. Joe's book, Badass Class. It's on Amazon. It's here and there. And it's really good. And it's not like a huge book. Like, Cam read it on a plane flight on the way home. There's a lot of good, just a lot of good stuff in there. Listeners, you got to check out the neck rule. Joe gives us this neck rule for managing illness. I don't think we should explain it now. I think we should make people read the book, but this is a good one. And they should also subscribe to your Substack, and email. I read almost all of them, Joe, and I really like it. And a great takeaway for me has been your thoughts on managing injury and illness, basically. And we all know these things, but it's hard to do on our own. It's like nip it in the bud, don't let this go on. Don't keep pushing. Don't test it out by doing 200-meter repeats or something. Like, fix this damn thing and then get better faster, and then you're training better. And that's true for both injury and illness. So you'll find stuff like that in the Substack. All right, guys. Well, thanks a ton. Congrats again on the book. Joe, what's the best place for people to find the book and or your other stuff?
Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it. The book, I have had multiple people, especially Montana, ask me if there is a way to not support Jeff Bezos, but unfortunately it is, and fortunately and unfortunately, it's printed by Amazon also, so there isn't really an un-Bezos way to do it. But it's so it's on Amazon. Just type in Badass Class, not Badass Book, because there are a couple others of those, but type in Badass Class. And then the best way to see the rest of my stuff is Coach Howdy, all one word, coachhowdy.substack.com. And that's my like newsletter and email all wrapped into one. There's a paid tier and a free tier. So if you want to get some great stuff, that's all on there. Yeah. And I'm very rarely on the socials these days, but I'm pretty consistently doing the Substack stuff. So
sweet,
that's the best way.
Cool. And if you type in Joe Howdyshell book on Amazon, it will come up as well.
Yeah.
As I found when I ordered my own copy.
There are probably fewer Joe Howdyshells than there are books named Badass. For sure.
I think so. Yep.
Sure.
I remembered your name better than the book name. Yeah. All right, guys. Have a good one. Hey, thanks as always for listening to the Skimo Gold podcast. Great to have you along. Joe Howdyshell. What a guy. Thanks for joining us. Brother Cam, thanks as always for your time as well. You can find Joe online. He's got a great Substack as well. Excellent content on there. You can find Cam at Cam from CB on Instagram, Skimo Gold on Instagram at Skimo Gold. I'm on there at Travis Macy, and my coaching stuff is at www.travismacy.com. As I said earlier in the conversation, if you're thinking about a coach for 2026, think about looking up Joe, think about looking up me, and talk with multiple coaches. Set up calls, find someone who is a good fit for your style, for your price, for personality. I think that's really important, and that, of course, is why I'm so happy to, in addition to promoting my own coaching, to promote Joe as well. Just because I think that he's a great guy. I think he's a great coach. Please help us continue building the Skimo Gold movement. Follow us on Instagram. Check us out on YouTube. All episodes are going on there. Hit that subscribe button, and with the podcast, share it on over with a friend to keep the momentum going, and give us some feedback on any of those platforms. Let us know who you want to hear from in future Skimo Gold episodes. Big thanks as always, Palm Tree Pod Co., Anthony Palmer and the team. If you're thinking about producing a podcast or hosting a podcast and you need a producer, check those guys out because they are awesome. They make this thing happen. Thanks as always, Palmer. We appreciate you. All right, folks, 2026, here we come. Let's go get it. Olympics are coming soon here. Really excited to bring you a lot of Skimo stuff up and through the Olympics. And until next time, we will catch you next time on Skimo Gold.